My husband booked me a solo cruise for our anniversary. Said it was his gift to me. A week on the water, no work, no stress, just me. He drove me to the port, carried my bag to the check-in line, kissed my forehead, and left so fast I didn't even see which direction he walked. I was 30 steps from the gangway when a port security officer touched my arm. "Ma'am, don't board that ship. Come with me right now." I didn't understand. I thought I'd done something wrong, left something in the car. Forgotten a form. I said, "Is there a problem with my ticket?" She didn't answer. She just kept walking, and something in the way she moved made me follow without asking again. That was the last normal moment of my life. 3 months ago, I was standing in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, watching my husband make coffee he never actually drank. I'm a physical therapist. I was 32 years old. I had a 6-year marriage, a house with a leaky gutter my husband kept saying he'd fix, and a feeling I couldn't name that had been sitting at the back of my throat for about a year. His name is Garrett. We met when I was 25 at a fundraiser for a children's hospital where I was volunteering and he was working the event catering. He had this laugh that took up the whole room. Big hands, easy smile. He made me feel safe in a way I didn't know I'd been missing. We got married in October 2018 at a vineyard outside Eugene. My parents flew in from Minneapolis. My older brother cried, which no one ever lets him forget. For the first few years, we were good. Really good. He worked in event hospitality, managing venues and catering staff. I worked long hours at my clinic. We weren't rich, but we were stable. We talked about having kids. We talked about buying something bigger. We talked about a lot of things. Then, in the spring of 2022, my grandmother passed away. She was 81, sharp until the end, and she left me everything. The house in Bend she'd owned outright since 1987, the savings account she'd built over 40 years of teaching middle school, total around $2.4 million. I was gutted by losing her. She was the person in my family who always made sense. After the funeral, I could barely function, and Garrett stepped in the way a good husband is supposed to. He handled the estate paperwork. He talked to the attorneys. He researched investment accounts. He said he wanted to protect what Grandma Lois had worked for. I let him. I signed things he put in front of me. I trusted the spreadsheets he showed me without really looking at them. My name was on the accounts, but his hands were on the wheel, and I was too deep in grief to notice that those weren't the same thing. By the winter of 2023, something was different. He started taking calls in the garage. Not occasionally. Every time. He'd be mid-sentence with me and his phone would buzz and he'd stand up and leave the room without explanation. He slept with it face down on the nightstand. Once I walked into the bedroom and he closed his laptop so fast the cord knocked over a glass of water. He said he was looking at stocks. He got irritated when I asked follow-up questions. He said I was being paranoid. I was a physical therapist. I spent my days reading bodies. I knew when someone was guarding something. In January of this year, I asked to see the investment statements. He said he'd pull them up this weekend. The weekend came. He'd forgotten. I asked again in February. He said the platform was having issues. In March, I found an envelope in the recycling bin, not our recycling, the one in his truck, that had the return address of a company called Meridian Capital Advisors. I'd never heard of it. I took a photo of it before I put it back. That night at dinner, I said I was thinking of calling the estate attorney who'd handled Grandma's probate just to do a financial check-in. Garrett's face did something very specific. It wasn't anger. It was a calculation, like he was running numbers behind his eyes. "Good idea," he said. "I'll set it up." He never did. 3 weeks later, he came home with a bottle of champagne and a printed itinerary. "Happy early anniversary," he said. I looked at the paper. Norwegian Cascade Cruise Line. Pacific Coastal Route, Portland to San Francisco to Santa Barbara, 7 nights, departing March 14th. A private balcony cabin, dinner reservations. A spa credit? "Garrett," I said slowly. "This is expensive." "You deserve it." He reached across the table. His hand covered mine. "You've been working so hard. You need a reset. I want you to actually rest. No clinic calls, no emails, just you and the ocean. Are you coming?" He shook his head. "Can't get away. Venue contract, I have to manage. But this is for you, just you." I sat there looking at the itinerary. Something felt wrong the way a smell can be wrong before you can identify the source. But he was looking at me with something that resembled tenderness, and I wanted to believe in it. "Okay," I said. He smiled. It didn't quite reach his eyes. The next 2 weeks moved strangely. He was attentive in a way he hadn't been in months. Made dinner twice, suggested we watch movies together, asked about my patients. It should have felt like things getting better. Instead, it felt like someone tying up loose ends. 4 days before departure, I came home from the clinic and found him at his desk with documents I didn't recognize. Insurance documents. He minimized the screen when he heard me come in. I said, "What are you looking at?" He said, "Nothing. Renewing some policies. Boring admin stuff." I went to the kitchen and stood at the sink for a long time. The morning of March 14th, he carried my suitcase to his car and drove me to the cruise terminal in Portland. He was quiet the whole way. Not peacefully quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight to it. He kept checking his mirrors. His jaw was tight. "You okay?" I asked. "Tired," he said. "Big week coming up." At the terminal, he pulled up to the drop-off lane. He got out, handed me my bag, hugged me once, brief, perfunctory, the kind of hug you give a coworker, and got back in the car. He didn't watch me walk in. I know because I turned around. The check-in line for the ship moved fast. I showed my ID, got my boarding card, followed the crowd toward the gangway. The ship was enormous from the dock, white and clean against a gray March sky. I'd never been on a cruise. I'd always wanted to go with someone. I was almost to the gangway when a woman in a Port Authority uniform stepped into my path. She was in her mid-40s, dark-haired, a lanyard with a federal badge. Her name tag read K. Holloway. She was watching me with the kind of careful attention that has a reason behind it. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "are you Lee Calloway?" "Yes. I need you to come with me. Please don't board the ship." My first thought was that there was a mistake with my booking. My second thought was that something had happened at home. "Is everything okay? Is someone hurt?" "You're not in trouble," she said. "But I need you to come with me right now." "Can you do that?" There was something in her voice, not panic, but urgency held very carefully in place that made me stop asking questions. I followed her through a door marked Authorized Personnel and into a corridor that smelled like industrial cleaner and salt air. She took me to a small office with 2 chairs, a metal desk, and a window that looked out at the dock. A man was already in the room. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, a Portland PD badge on his belt, and a face that had delivered hard news before. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "I'm Detective Frank Adler. I work with the Port Security Task Force. Please sit down." I sat. My hands were in my lap. I didn't know what my face was doing. "Your husband dropped you off about 40 minutes ago," Detective Adler said. "Yes. Before you arrived, Officer Holloway observed your husband in the terminal. He wasn't in the passenger drop-off area. He was inside near the embarkation desk on his phone. She got close enough to hear parts of the call." He paused. Mrs. Calloway, your husband said the words, "Policy is active, 2 million. She'll be on the ship by noon. Everything is set." The room was very quiet. I started. "Do you have a life insurance policy?" We have a basic joint policy. It's maybe 200,000, something like that." Adler put a notepad on the table. "With your consent, I'd like to contact your insurance providers to verify any active policies under your name." "Can I do that?" "Yes, of course." He made a call. 12 minutes later, he turned his screen toward me. "Pacific Shield Insurance. Policyholder Lee Ann Calloway. Date of birth March 3, 1992. Beneficiary Garrett Michael Calloway. Coverage amount $2 million. Policy effective date November 12, 2023. Premiums paid in full." I read it 3 times. "I never signed this," I said. "Is that your signature?" He pointed to the bottom of the scanned document. I looked. My name, my handwriting almost. But the L in Lee was wrong. I always close the loop. This one was open. "That's not my signature," I said. My voice was very steady. I didn't understand how. "I've signed my name the same way since I was a teenager. My grandmother taught me cursive. I always close the L." Adler photographed the document. He asked me to write my name 3 times on a notepad. He compared them. "This is a forgery," he said. I put my hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake. Over the next hour, Detective Adler and Officer Holloway walked me through what they'd found. With my consent, they pulled Garrett's financial records. He hadn't worked a full venue contract since September 2022. His hospitality management license had been flagged by the Oregon Business Registry in August of that year. Complaints from 2 venues about misappropriated client funds totaling $60,000. He'd never told me. He'd lost the license quietly, the way you lose things when you're hoping no one notices. Since then, he'd been pulling money from my grandmother's inheritance through a management account I'd given him signatory access to. Not all at once. Slowly. $40,000 here, $60,000 there, spread across 17 months so it wouldn't flag the bank's automated alerts. Total withdrawn, $840,000 of my grandmother's money. There was more. In December of last year, he borrowed $120,000 from a private lender, a man named Curtis Webb, whose name was flagged in Oregon state records in connection with loan fraud and 3 counts of predatory lending. The loan had a private repayment clause, full balance due by March 31st, 17 days from the day I was standing in that Port Authority office. Adler closed his laptop. He looked at me the way people look at you when they're deciding how much you can handle. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "we have reason to believe your husband intended for you to have an accident on this cruise." My mouth went dry. "We've been in contact with an investigator in our financial crimes unit since yesterday. When Officer Holloway flagged the phone call this morning, it confirmed what we'd already started looking at. Your husband researched maritime accident statistics. We found browser history on a shared cloud account tied to his email. Searches including accidental drowning cruise ships, passenger overboard protocols, how long before a person is declared missing at sea, cruise ship insurance claims timeline." I sat very still. He also searched highest-rated cruise routes with poor cellular coverage. Adler said quietly, "The Pacific coastal route has significant dead zones between Portland and San Francisco." A dead zone. He'd chosen a route with dead zones. "What do I do?" I asked. "Right now," Adler said, "nothing. You're safe. The ship will depart on schedule. We are not going to stop it, because we don't want your husband to know you didn't board." They gave me a room. Not in the Port Authority office, a hotel 2 miles from the terminal, the kind with a business center and blackout curtains and a card key door that locked from inside. A female officer named Detective Bree Santos stayed with me. She had a calm face and a coffee thermos she refilled twice. We watched my phone. Garrett started texting at 12:47 p.m., 47 minutes after the ship's scheduled departure. "Hope you're settling in. Text when you have signal." Then at 1:30, "Getting lunch." Then at 2:15, "Let me know you're okay." At 3:08, he called. I watched it ring. Detective Santos shook her head slightly. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 42 seconds long. His voice was controlled even. "Hey, just wanted to hear your voice. Call when you can. Love you." He called my best friend Priya at 4 p.m. We know this because Priya called me 20 minutes later, confused and a little scared. Detective Santos answered, identified herself, and told Priya I was safe but could not speak right now. Priya, to her credit, asked 0 questions and said, "Tell her I'm here." At 6:34 p.m., Garrett's location data pulled from the family GPS share we'd never turned off placed him at the Oregon coast. Cannon Beach. He'd driven 90 miles from Portland in what should have been celebratory solitude. Instead, he sat in a parking lot overlooking the water for 2 hours and 20 minutes. Detective Adler, back at Port Authority headquarters, called me at 7:15. "He's checking a maritime tracking app," he said. "The ship's public AIS signal. He's watching it move." He was watching the ship. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the hotel bed in my travel clothes and stared at the ceiling and thought about the night Garrett proposed. In our apartment kitchen, no ring at first, just him on one knee next to the dishwasher. I thought about the way he'd looked when I cried at my grandmother's funeral and he put his coat around my shoulders without saying anything. I thought about what it meant that none of that was enough, that $2.4 million was more interesting to him than I was. At 11:52 p.m., he texted again, "Miss you already." Detective Adler called me at 9 a.m. the next morning. He went home last night. "We have audio from the house. A federal judge signed a warrant at midnight. We're live." He played me a clip through his phone. Garrett's voice, in our kitchen, on the phone with someone. His tone was different from anything I'd heard from him in years. Not the careful control, not the tight-jawed quiet. He was relaxed, satisfied. "She's on the boat," he said. 7 days, plenty of time. Webb can wait 2 more weeks. Once the policy pays, I'll wire him directly. Clean. A pause. She won't fight the current. She never learned to swim properly. I used to tease her about it. I put my hand over my mouth. Detective Santos put a hand on my arm, steady. He'd known. He'd known I was a weak swimmer since our 2nd year together. I told him, embarrassed, on a trip to the coast. He'd laughed and said he'd teach me someday. He never did. He was counting on it. At 2 p.m. on day 2, the Financial Crimes Unit sent Adler a new report. Garrett had withdrawn $19,000 in cash from 3 separate ATMs in the past 10 days using my personal debit card, which had gone missing from my wallet in February. I'd assumed I'd lost it. He'd taken it. He'd also contacted our joint brokerage account, the one that held the remaining balance of my grandmother's money, just under $1.5 million, and attempted to change the sole signatory. The brokerage had flagged the request and held it pending verification. We had him on record trying to access my money before he even thought I was dead. Day 3, Adler called again. The Financial Crimes Unit had traced a payment Garrett made in February, $14,000, wired to an LLC in Nevada called Pacific Rim Consulting. The company had 1 registered employee. His name was Glenn Farrow, 44 years old, formerly licensed as a maritime safety technician, license revoked in 2019 after a workplace incident on a commercial vessel involving falsified inspection records. They picked up Glenn Farrow at a motel in Astoria, Oregon, 40 miles from where the cruise ship was now sailing. He'd been on the coast, waiting. I sat in the hotel room and thought about the Pacific Ocean and what it would have taken. A distraction, a balcony, a cold current and no signal, and a woman who couldn't swim well, and a husband 300 miles away with a solid alibi. Detective Adler drove to the hotel that afternoon. He sat across from me and said, in the careful way he had, Glenn Farrow worked as a maritime event contractor, someone hired to arrange private excursions, special experiences for cruise passengers. Garrett had arranged for him to make contact with you on day 2, offer you a sunset kayak tour. I knew how to process this information in theory. I had the facts, I could list them. My husband had arranged for a man to take me out on the water and not bring me back. The kayak tour was already paid for. Mrs. Calloway was on the manifest. What did Farrow say? I asked. He lawyered up for about 6 hours, Adler said. Then he took the deal. He confirmed the arrangement. He confirmed the payment. He said Garrett told him to make it look like a rogue current. These things happen. Experienced kayakers get into trouble. It's tragic. He paused. He said Garrett told him, quote, "She won't make noise. She panics in water." He panics in water. Garrett had said that about me like he knew me. Like knowing me was something he turned into a tool. When do we go back? I asked. Adler looked at me. Tomorrow. He's going to come home tonight. We'll move in the morning. That night, I called Priya from a burner phone the detectives had given me. I couldn't explain everything. I said, I'm okay. I'll explain when this is over. I need you to know I'm okay. She said, Lee, whatever it is, I'm here. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, I sat in the back of an unmarked car while Detective Adler drove to my house. Detective Santos was beside me. 2 more officers followed. The sky was low and gray the way Portland always is in March, the kind of gray that feels permanent. Our house looked the same. The leaky gutter nobody had fixed. The rosemary bush by the front steps I'd planted 3 years ago. The blue welcome mat I'd picked out at Target because Garrett said he didn't care what color it was. He didn't care about much, it turned out, except the money. Adler knocked 3 times official. Nothing. A second time. Then he used a key the property access warrant covered and pushed the door open. Garrett was in the living room. He was on the couch with his laptop and he had the cruise ship's public tracking map on the screen. He was watching it. Even now, day 4, he was watching. He heard the door and looked up, and then he saw me. I have thought about his face many times since then. I have tried to find something in it. Shock, grief, the flash of a man realizing what he'd almost done. There was shock. There was certainly shock. But underneath it, very briefly, very clearly, there was something else. Rage. That I was there. that I was standing in my own living room. "Lee," he said. "Hi, Garrett," I said. He stood, he took a step forward, and Detective Adler was between us before I finished breathing. "Mr. Stold. Calloway." Adler's voice was flat. "Step back." Garrett looked past him at me. His hands were at his sides. "You don't understand what I was doing. I was trying to fix things. The debt, you don't understand what Webb would have done. I understand you arranged for a man to take me out on the water and not bring me back," I said. "I understand you forged my signature on a $2 million life insurance policy. I understand you spent $800,000 of my grandmother's money." My voice was very steady. I was surprised by it. "I understand everything, Garrett." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the detective behind me, the officers at the door. Then he ran. Toward the kitchen, toward the back, the same instinct that always makes guilty people think there's a way out through the back of their own house. He made it 4 steps before 2 officers caught him. He didn't say anything when they cuffed him. He just looked at me. The whole way to the door, he looked at me. I looked back. I didn't blink. The car pulled away and I sat down on my own couch in my own house and finally started shaking. Garrett was charged with attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, identity theft, and 2 counts of financial fraud. His trial was 11 months later. Glenn Farrow pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and agreed to testify. Curtis Webb, the loan shark, was picked up on separate federal charges 6 weeks after Garrett's arrest. It turned out the maritime scheme wasn't the only arrangement Webb had financed. Garrett's attorney tried to argue the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that Garrett had been in financial desperation but had never intended any harm. The jury had Garrett's browser history, the payment to Farrow, the forged insurance policy, and a recording of my husband saying my name and the words, "She won't make noise." They deliberated for 8 days, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge said something I wrote down and kept. He said, "You didn't just plan to kill your wife, you planned to use her grief, her trust, and her love for her grandmother as the mechanism. That is not desperation. That is deliberate and sustained cruelty." Garrett got 38 years. He'll be eligible for parole at 71. I spoke at sentencing. I said what I needed to say, which wasn't much. I said that I had given him the best version of my trust, and he had calculated, over years, the most efficient way to turn it into a weapon. I said my grandmother worked 40 years to build something safe for the people she loved. I said I was going to spend the rest of my life being worth that. The judge thanked me. Priya cried from the gallery. I didn't. The first 6 months after the trial were harder than I expected. I sold the house. I couldn't sleep in rooms where he'd planned things. I moved into a smaller apartment in the Pearl District, 5th floor. Big windows. Nobody else's history in the walls. I found a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. Her name is Dr. Casey Olofsson. She has a spider plant on her windowsill that she calls Gerald, and she told me in our second session that what I was feeling, the strange absence of grief, the delayed panic, the hypervigilance on the water, was not unusual for someone who'd survived what I had. She said, "You spent years adapting to someone who was slowly removing your ground. It takes time to trust the ground again." I didn't go near the coast for 8 months. When I finally did, Priya drove us to Cannon Beach, the same parking lot where Garrett had sat watching a tracking app while I lay in a hotel room not sleeping. I sat in the car for a while. Priya didn't rush me. She opened the windows and let the salt air in and waited. I got out. I walked to the water. I didn't go in, but I stood close enough to feel the spray, and I didn't run, and that felt like something. Officer Kim Holloway, the Port Authority officer who'd stepped into my path that morning, retired from port security in the fall. I met her for lunch in October at a restaurant near the waterfront. She told me she'd flagged Garrett because something had been off. Not any single thing, but the way he'd moved through the terminal. The way he'd positioned himself to watch the gangway without seeming to watch it. The way his face had looked when I disappeared inside, not like a husband missing his wife, like a man checking off a box. I second-guess myself constantly, she told me. I flagged people before and been wrong. I've almost not flagged people and been right. That morning, I couldn't walk away. "I know," I said. "Thank you for not walking away." She looked at her coffee. "You'd have figured it out." "I don't know if that's true." "I'd like to think so." But what I know is that I spent years learning to doubt my own instincts because someone I loved told me consistently, carefully, quietly that I was wrong when I felt something, that I was paranoid, that I was ungrateful, that I was lucky to have him. I wasn't lucky to have him. I was unlucky to have missed what he was, and I was extraordinarily lucky that a woman in a Port Authority uniform trusted a feeling and moved. Priya started a financial literacy workshop series for women in Portland. She asked me to speak at the first one. I said yes. I stood in front of a room of 40 women and told them the one thing I wish someone had told me: having your name on an account is not the same as understanding what's in it. Grief is not a reason to hand someone your keys. Love is not evidence of safety. Trust is something you build through action, not something you grant because someone asked. 60 women came to the second workshop, 120 to the third. I got a call in January from a detective in Phoenix. His name was Marcus Webb, no relation to the loan shark, and he worked cold cases for the Maricopa County Sheriff. He'd read about my case. He was looking at a drowning death from 2016. The husband had collected life insurance. The signature on the policy had a closed L. The wife's name was Lee, too, he said. Different spelling. Doesn't mean anything, probably. But the pattern. I said, send me what you have. I'm still working with Detective Webb. I can't share details yet, but I will. I went back to the cruise terminal in Portland on March 14th of this year. A year to the day. I stood in the embarkation hall and looked at the spot where Kim Holloway had stepped into my path. The ship that day was a different one, same line, different name. I watched people board. Couples, families, a woman traveling alone with a book tucked under her arm. I didn't feel afraid. I felt grateful in a way that's hard to articulate. Not happy, exactly, but present. Aware that presence is not guaranteed and shouldn't be wasted. I booked a cruise for this summer, Portland to Alaska. 7 nights. A balcony cabin. I'm going with Priya. I learned things from the trip I never took. I learned that the people who hurt us most are rarely strangers. I learned that grief makes us porous, and that there are people who know exactly how to walk through that opening. I learned that instinct is a form of intelligence we've been taught to distrust. I'm done distrusting it. If something feels wrong, it's worth the inconvenience of being right. It's worth the awkwardness of asking the question. It's worth stopping at the gangway, at the dotted line, at the kitchen table where someone is asking you to sign something you haven't read. It's always worth stopping. My grandmother left me $2.4 million and a way of writing her name that I inherited and never changed. That detail saved my life. Not the money. The signature. She taught me to close the loop. I'm trying to do that now. One day at a time. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since everything happened. Not in a dramatic way. Just the quiet, practical way you think about things when you've had enough time and enough therapy to stop flinching at your own memories. Garrett didn't become who he was overnight. That's the part people don't talk about. There was no single moment where he chose to be the kind of person who researches drowning statistics and books a cruise with a dead zone in the signal map. It was a series of smaller choices, compounding over years, each one making the next one easier. He chose to hide the license revocation. He chose to move money without telling me. He chose to let me grieve my grandmother while he was calculating what her savings were worth. Every choice he made was its own cause, and every cause had an effect on him, on his character, on the distance between the man I married and the man who drove away from a port terminal without looking back. I made choices too. I chose to believe spreadsheets I didn't read. I chose to interpret his withdrawal as stress instead of strategy. I chose, over and over, to pick comfort over clarity. I'm not blaming myself for what he did. I want to be very clear about that. But I do think there's something honest and important in admitting that the decision to stop looking has consequences. Not moral consequences, not punishment, just the plain mechanical reality that if you stop paying attention, things move without you. What I keep coming back to is Kim Holloway. She didn't know my name. She didn't know anything about my marriage or my grandmother or the missing $800,000. She just noticed something that didn't fit, and instead of talking herself out of it, she moved. That's it. That's the whole thing. She trusted her own read of the situation more than she trusted the discomfort of being wrong. I'd spent years doing the opposite. I'd felt something was off and then immediately built a case against my own instinct. Too paranoid, too suspicious, Not fair to him. Not grateful enough. Garrett didn't manufacture that tendency in me. It was already there, some old training about being easier to live with, less demanding, more agreeable. He just found it useful. The work I've done since, the therapy, the workshops with Priya, the conversations with women who write to me after reading about the case, is mostly just practicing the opposite. Noticing something and not immediately undoing the noticing. Letting a feeling exist long enough to ask what it's telling me. That's not cynicism. I'm not walking around suspicious of everyone. I'm in a better place than I've been in years, honestly. But I understand now that intelligence without the willingness to act on it isn't really protection. You can know something is wrong and still do nothing, still smile and sign and board the ship. The knowing matters, but the moving matters more. Garrett is in prison. Glenn Farrow took a plea. The loan shark is facing federal charges. The money that can be recovered is being recovered. These aren't victories exactly. They're just outcomes. The real outcome is that I'm here writing this, planning a trip to Alaska with my best friend, working with a detective in Phoenix on a cold case that might bring someone else's family some peace. That's what I want to do with the time I almost didn't have. Not perform survival, just use it well. If you're reading this and something in your life doesn't feel right, in your finances, in your relationship, in any corner of your life where someone keeps asking you to look away, I'm not telling you to panic. I'm telling you to look. Close the loop, like my grandmother taught me. It's always worth closing the loop.